Dust filled the air like a red cloud as Lucy dragged herself through another tunnel in the crystal mines of Crimson Ridge. Her small hands already bleeding from the sharp edges of the rocks she had to move every day since the ships came and took her from Earth 3 months ago. The alien overseers walked on 2 legs like humans, but their skin looked like metal, and their eyes glowed green in the dark tunnels. They never spoke to the human prisoners except to shout orders or hit them with energy sticks that made your whole body burn with pain for hours. Lucy was only 12, but she had learned quickly that crying made the overseers angry, and angry overseers meant less food and more beatings, so she kept her tears inside and focused on filling her quota of crystal shards before the day cycle ended. The other humans in her work group were mostly adults who had given up talking much after the first few weeks. They moved like ghosts through the tunnels, their eyes empty and their movements automatic as they chipped away at the glowing crystals that the aliens needed for their ships. Sometimes Lucy tried to remember what her bedroom looked like back on Earth, or the way her mother used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, but those memories felt like dreams from another life that belonged to someone else. Someone who had never seen cities burning or heard the screams when the transport ships loaded people like cattle. The mining planet was nothing like Earth, with its red sky and 3 moons that never seemed to move. And the gravity was lighter, which made Lucy feel dizzy for the first few weeks until her body got used to it. Every morning the aliens would wake them with loud sirens and march them down into the tunnels where the crystals grew like frozen lightning in the walls, and every night they would collapse on hard metal beds in cells that were too small and too cold. Lucy had tried to make friends with some of the other prisoners, but most of them were too broken or too scared to care about anything except surviving one more day, and the few who still talked usually only complained about the food or the work, or how they would never see home again. Today felt different, though. There was something wrong with the way the tunnel walls were shaking, and small rocks kept falling from the ceiling, making little pinging sounds when they hit the metal floor. The adult humans in her group had noticed it too, and they kept looking up nervously every time another piece of rock fell, but the alien overseers just shouted at them to work faster and threatened them with the energy sticks. Lucy was working in the deepest part of the tunnel system where the crystals were biggest and brightest, so far from the entrance that she could barely see the lights from the main shaft when she looked back over her shoulder. The shaking was getting worse and worse, and now she could hear a deep rumbling sound that seemed to come from somewhere far below her feet, like the planet itself was groaning in pain. One of the older prisoners, a man named Robert who sometimes shared his food with Lucy when the overseers weren't looking, grabbed her arm and whispered that they should head back toward the main tunnel before something bad happened. But just as Lucy turned to follow him, the ceiling above them exploded in a shower of rocks and dust and metal beams, and she felt herself falling through empty space as the floor disappeared beneath her feet. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Robert reaching for her hand, his mouth open in a scream she couldn't hear over the sound of the entire tunnel system collapsing around them. When Lucy woke up, she couldn't move her legs, and there was something heavy pressing down on her chest that made it hard to breathe. The air was thick with dust, and she could taste blood in her mouth. She was trapped in a small pocket of space between 2 huge chunks of concrete and twisted metal, and when she tried to push against them, they wouldn't budge even a little bit. The darkness around her was complete and terrible, not like the dim lighting in the tunnels, but a thick black emptiness that made her feel like she was floating in space. With no up or down, Lucy called out for help, but her voice sounded small and weak in the darkness. And after shouting until her throat was raw, she realized that no one could hear her through all the rock and debris. Hours passed, or maybe days. Lucy couldn't tell because time felt different in the darkness, and she kept drifting in and out of consciousness as the pain in her legs got worse and worse. She tried not to think about dying alone in the dark, but the thoughts kept coming anyway. And she found herself talking out loud just to hear a human voice, even if it was only her own. Lucy told herself stories about Earth and about the books she used to read before the aliens came. Stories about brave heroes who never gave up even when everything seemed hopeless. But as more time passed and the pain got worse and her water ran out, even the stories couldn't keep the fear away anymore. That was when Lucy started to cry, really cry for the first time since the ships took her from Earth, and her sobs echoed through the darkness around her like the sound of her heart breaking in. Cried for her mother and father who were probably dead. and for Robert, who had tried to save her, and for all the humans who would never see their homes again. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she just lay there in the darkness, listening to her own breathing get slower and shallower. Lucy knew she was going to die, and there was nothing she could do about it, but somehow that made her feel less afraid. At least she wouldn't have to work in the mines anymore or watch the overseers hurt people. Just before she closed her eyes for what she thought would be the last time, Lucy whispered into the darkness, "Please, somebody help me. I don't want to die alone down here." Her voice was so small and broken that she didn't think anyone could possibly hear it. But somewhere far below, in tunnels even older and deeper than the mining shafts, something ancient and powerful heard the cry of a human child, calling out in pure desperation. The sound traveled through cracks in the rock and along underground rivers and through caverns that had been dark for thousands of years, carrying with it all of Lucy's pain and fear and desperate hope. In the deepest cave on Crimson Ridge, something that had been sleeping for 300 years suddenly opened, eyes that glowed like molten gold in the darkness. Steam rose from the underground hot springs that heated the ancient cavern system. As Grimjaw lifted his massive head from where he had been resting for decades, his golden eyes focusing on sounds that most creatures could never hear. The star dragon was old beyond measure, with scales that had once shone like polished obsidian, but now bore the scars and dulled patches of countless battles, and his body stretched nearly 100 meters from nose to tail. For 300 years, Grimjaw had hidden in these forgotten caves, avoiding the Dominion forces that had hunted his people to extinction, and trying to forget the day they killed his young daughter, while he watched helplessly from the sky. The dragon had sworn never to interfere with the surface world again, because every time he tried to help someone, the Dominion found them and made them pay for his kindness with their lives. But something about this human child's cry was different from all the other pleas for help he had ignored over the centuries. There was no anger or hatred in her voice, just pure terror and a desperate wish not to die alone. Grimjaw tried to convince himself to ignore the sound and go back to sleep, but the child's voice kept echoing in his mind like a song he couldn't forget, with a deep sigh that sent ripples across the underground lake. The ancient dragon began moving through tunnels he hadn't traveled in decades, following the sound of Lucy's cries through miles of solid rock. His massive claws left deep grooves in the stone as he climbed upward through shafts that connected to the mining tunnels, and his movements sent vibrations through the ground that could have been mistaken for earthquakes. The closer Grimjaw got to the surface mines, the more he could smell the scent of fear and desperation that clung to the human prisoners, mixed with the metallic odor of the alien overseers who guarded. Then when he reached the collapsed section where Lucy was trapped, Grimjaw had to use all his strength to move the massive chunks of concrete and twisted metal that had fallen on top of her. The dragon worked carefully, knowing that one wrong move could crush the small human even more, and as he cleared away the debris, he could hear her voice getting weaker and more desperate. Finally, Grimjaw saw her, a tiny figure with dark hair and pale skin, covered in dust and blood, but still alive despite being trapped for almost 2 days. Lucy's eyes went wide when she saw the enormous dragon head appear above her, but instead of screaming, she just stared at him with wonder and exhaustion. "Are you real?" she whispered in a voice so small that Grimjaw had to lean closer to hear her. "Or am I already dead?" The dragon carefully lifted the last piece of debris from her legs, trying not to think about how much she reminded him of his own lost hatchling with her brave eyes and stubborn spirit. "I am real, small human," Grimjaw rumbled in his deep voice that made the tunnel walls vibrate. "And you are not dead, though you came very close." Lucy tried to stand, but her legs were badly hurt and she almost fell, so Grimjaw gently scooped her up in one massive claw and began carrying her down through the tunnels toward his hidden lair. As they traveled deeper underground, Lucy asked the dragon questions in her broken common galactic language that she had learned from listening to the alien overseers. She wanted to know his name and where he came from and why he had saved her when no one else would help. And Grimjaw found himself answering even though he hadn't had a real conversation with anyone in centuries. "My name is Grimjaw," he told her as they entered his vast cavern home that was filled with treasures from civilizations that no longer existed. "And I saved you because your cry reminded me of someone I lost long ago." Lucy looked around at the incredible cave with its glowing crystals and pools of warm water and piles of ancient artifacts. But instead of being greedy or afraid, she just said thank you with such genuine gratitude that it made Grimjaw's ancient heart skip a beat. "Thank you for not letting me die alone," she continued, tears running down her dirty cheeks. "I was so scared and I thought nobody cared." For the first time in 300 years, Grimjaw felt something other than rage or emptiness. He felt protective of this small human who showed such courage in the face of impossible odds. Over the next few days, as Lucy's legs healed, she told Grimjaw about Earth and how beautiful it had been before the Dominion destroyed it, and about her parents who had hidden her in a basement during the invasion, but were killed trying to protect other families. She spoke about the transport ships that took thousands of humans to work as slaves on different planets, and about the other prisoners in the mines who had given up hope of ever being free again. Grimjaw listened to every word and felt his old anger beginning to burn again. Not the helpless rage he had carried for centuries, but a focused fury at the injustice of what had been done to innocent people. In return, the dragon told Lucy about his people and how they had once been the guardians of the galaxy, protecting weaker species from those who would harm them. He explained how the Dominion had turned the other races against the Star Dragons by spreading lies about them being dangerous monsters, and how they had been hunted down one by one until only Grimjaw remained. "Why didn't you keep fighting?" Lucy asked with the simple directness that only children possess. "If you were trying to protect people like me?" The question hit Grimjaw like a physical blow, because it was the same one he had been asking himself for 300 years, because every time I tried to help, more innocents died, he answered quietly. "The Dominion always made others pay for my actions, so I thought it was better to hide." Lucy was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at the massive dragon with eyes that held wisdom beyond her. "Years, but if you're the strongest thing I've ever seen and you're hiding," she said softly, "what hope do the rest of us have?" Her words cut deeper than any weapon ever had, straight to the heart of the shame and guilt that Grimjaw had been carrying for centuries. Here was a child who had lost everything and been through horrors that would break most adults, and she was asking him why he had given up when others needed him most. That night, as Lucy slept curled up against his warm scales, Grimjaw made a decision that surprised even him. He would help her escape from this planet and find somewhere safe. But when he told Lucy his plan the next morning, she shook her head firmly and said something that changed everything. "I won't leave without the others," she declared with fierce determination. "We don't abandon each other. That's what makes us human." Fire danced in Grimjaw's golden eyes as he stared at the small human girl who had just asked him to risk everything he had spent 3 centuries protecting. But there was something in Lucy's determined expression that reminded him of who he used to be before fear made him a coward. "You want me to attack a Dominion mining facility to save people I don't even know?" the dragon asked, his voice echoing through the cavern with disbelief and growing respect. Lucy nodded without hesitation, even though she was still weak from her injuries and barely came up to the dragon's smallest claw. "There are almost 200 humans in those mines," she explained, "and if we leave them behind, the overseers will work them to death within a year. I've seen what happens to people who give up hope." Grimjaw had forgotten what it felt like to care about strangers, to put others' lives before his own safety. But this human child was awakening, something in him that had been sleeping for far too long. "The facility is heavily guarded," he warned her. "There are patrol ships and energy barriers and enough firepower to level half this planet. It would be suicide." But Lucy just smiled at him with the fearless grin of someone who had already faced death and decided she wasn't afraid anymore. "You're a star dragon," she said simply, "and I'm human. Together we can do anything." Her faith in him was both humbling and terrifying because Grimjaw knew that if he failed, this brave little girl would die along with all the people she was trying to save over the next 3 days. Lucy helped Grimjaw plan the most audacious rescue mission either of them had ever imagined, using her knowledge of the mining facility's layout and his understanding of Dominion military tactics. The human child had a natural talent for strategy that amazed the ancient dragon. She could see patterns and weaknesses that his centuries of experience had missed. Lucy suggested they strike during the shift change when the guards would be distracted, and that they use the old tunnel systems to approach the facility from underground where the sensors wouldn't detect them. The humans are kept in cell block 7 during rest periods, she explained, drawing maps in the dirt with her finger. But we'll have to move fast because the alarm systems will activate within minutes of the first attack. Grimjaw marveled at how this small person could plan a military operation with the skill of a seasoned general, all while maintaining her compassion for others and her unshakable belief that no one should be left behind. On the night of the rescue, Lucy rode on Grimjaw's back through the tunnel systems that connected his lair to the mining facility, feeling the dragon's powerful muscles moving beneath his scales as he navigated through miles of underground passages. The plan was simple in concept but deadly in execution. Grimjaw would emerge from beneath the facility and create enough chaos to draw the guards away from the prisoner blocks, while Lucy used her small size to slip inside and guide the humans to safety. When they reached the underground chamber directly below the mining facility, Grimjaw could feel his heart pounding with excitement and terror because he was about to break 300 years of hiding to save people he had never met. "Are you ready, small warrior?" he asked Lucy as she prepared to climb through a ventilation shaft that led to the prisoner areas. Lucy looked back at him with eyes that held no fear, only determination and trust. "I've been ready since the day they took me from Earth," she replied. "Now let's show them what happens when a human and a dragon work together." Grimjaw erupted from the ground like a force of nature, his massive form smashing through concrete and steel as if they were made of paper, and for the first time in centuries he allowed his true power to flow freely. The alien overseers scattered in terror as the legendary Star Dragon rose above their facility, his roar shaking the ground for miles around, and his breath weapon turning. Their defensive positions into molten slag alarm sirens wailed across the complex as Dominion patrol ships scrambled to respond, but Grimjaw was already in the air, weaving between their energy blasts with an agility that belied his enormous size. Meanwhile, Lucy was crawling through air ducts and maintenance shafts, following the path she had memorized during her weeks of imprisonment, her small hands trembling with adrenaline but her mind focused on the task ahead. She reached Cell Block 7 just as the facility's defensive systems came online, and she had to duck behind a support beam as energy bolts flew past her head. The human prisoners looked up in amazement as this small girl appeared among them, like an angel, shouting for them to follow her if they wanted to live. "There's a star dragon fighting for us," Lucy called out as she led them through corridors filled with smoke and debris. "But we have to move now before the reinforcements arrive." Some of the prisoners hesitated because they couldn't believe that anyone would risk their life to save worthless slaves, but others recognized Lucy and trusted her enough to follow. Robert was among the first to join her, limping from an old injury but grinning with joy at seeing the girl he thought had died in the tunnel collapse. "I knew you were too stubborn to die, little one," he said as they ran through the facility toward the escape route Grimjaw had cleared. For them outside, the dragon was fighting the entire garrison single-handedly, his claws tearing through armor plating like tissue paper, and his tail sweeping patrol ships from the sky. But even Grimjaw's incredible power had limits, and Lucy could see that more enemy ships were arriving every minute, threatening to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. "This way," she shouted to the escaping prisoners, leading them down into the tunnel system where Grimjaw would meet them once he finished buying them time. The last thing Lucy saw before disappearing underground was the magnificent sight of Grimjaw breathing dragonfire that turned the night sky orange, standing defiant against impossible odds because a human child had asked him to remember who he used to be. 2 hours later, nearly 200 humans huddled in Grimjaw's cavern home, staring in wonder at the ancient treasures and warm pools while their rescuer tended to his battle wounds. The dragon had taken several hits from enemy weapons, but his scales had protected him from serious injury, and he felt more alive than he had in centuries. "Did we really do it?" Lucy asked as she sat beside his massive head, her voice filled with amazement at what they had accomplished together. "We did more than that, small warrior," Grimjaw rumbled with pride. "We reminded the galaxy that star dragons and humans are not so easily broken." Around them, the rescued humans were already beginning to organize themselves and plan for the future, their spirits renewed by the knowledge that someone had cared enough to fight for their freedom. And in the depths of space, Dominion commanders were sending urgent reports to their superiors about the impossible sight they had witnessed. A star dragon and a human child working together to strike a blow against the empire that had oppressed them both. Messages traveled faster than light across the galaxy as news of the impossible rescue spread through hidden networks that the Dominion had never discovered, carrying with them something more dangerous than any weapon. Hope on mining worlds and prison colonies and slave ships throughout the empire. Humans whispered to each other about a young girl and an ancient dragon who had struck back against their oppressors, and for the first time in years, they began to believe that freedom might be possible. Lucy stood in the main cavern of Grimjaw's lair, watching as rescued prisoners organized themselves into work groups and began planning for a future none of them had dared to imagine just days before. The humans had transformed the ancient cave system into a bustling underground city, setting up sleeping areas and food preparation stations, and even a small medical bay where the injured could recover. But it was the communications center that amazed Lucy the most. Using salvaged equipment from the mining facility and Grimjaw's knowledge of old Star Dragon technology, they had built a network that could reach other human settlements across dozens of star systems. "Lucy, you need to hear this," called Marcus, one of the older prisoners who had become their chief engineer, as he adjusted the frequencies on their makeshift radio array. The voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with static, but the hope in it was unmistakable. "This is Sarah calling from the factory world of New Berlin. We heard about your escape and we want to help fight back. We have 300 people here and access to manufacturing equipment." More voices joined in from across the galaxy as word spread. Humans who had been working in secret to survive were now ready to work together to resist. "We're getting reports from 17 different worlds," Marcus told Lucy as more messages poured in. "Some of them have been hiding for years, waiting for a signal that it was time to act. But it wasn't just humans who were responding to their call. Other species that the Dominion had declared extinct or worthless were emerging from hiding to join what was becoming a true galactic rebellion." Grimjaw was amazed to discover that several of his own people had survived by going into deep hibernation in hidden caves and asteroid bases, and they began arriving at Crimson Ridge in small groups, their ancient ships cloaked from Dominion sensors. "I thought I was the last," he told Lucy, as they watched a pair of younger star dragons land in the cavern's main chamber, their scales bright with youth and their eyes burning with eagerness for battle. "Maybe that's what we all thought," Lucy replied with wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Maybe the Dominion wins by making everyone feel alone." The arrival of other survivors brought new challenges as well as new hope. Different species had different needs and different ways of thinking, and there were old grudges and misunderstandings that threatened to tear the alliance apart before it could truly begin. Lucy found herself becoming a bridge between these diverse groups, her natural empathy and honest curiosity allowing her to connect with beings that had lost all trust in others. She spent hours talking with crystalline entities who communicated through light patterns, and energy beings who existed as pure thought, and even a group of plant-like creatures who had been hiding in the deep forests of abandoned worlds. "How do you do it?" asked David, another young human who had become one of Lucy's closest friends among the rescued prisoners. "How do you get them all to trust you?" Lucy thought about the question as she watched a star dragon teaching a group of human children how to work with ancient technology while crystal beings provided light for their lessons. "I think it's because I really listened to them," she said finally. "Not just to their words, but to their feelings. Everyone wants to be understood, no matter what they look like." Her ability to unite different species became even more important when the Dominion began their counterattack, sending massive fleets to hunt down the rebels and destroy any world that had aided them. The first battle took place in the asteroid belt around a dead star where a group of energy beings had established a hidden base, and Lucy watched from Grimjaw's back as their small fleet faced overwhelming odds. But what should have been a massacre became something else entirely. The rebels fought with a coordination and purpose that the Dominion had never encountered. Before human tactical flexibility combined with Star Dragon firepower, and crystal being energy shields and energy creature speed, to create a fighting force that was more than the sum of its parts. "They're not fighting like separate armies," observed General Kane, the Dominion fleet commander, as he watched his superior forces being outmaneuvered by what should have been a ragtag group of escaped slaves. The rebels were fighting like a single organism with many different abilities, each species contributing their unique strengths while covering for others' weaknesses. Lucy coordinated their attacks from Grimjaw's back, her young voice calm and clear as she directed crystal beings to provide cover while star dragons struck at capital ships and energy creatures disrupted enemy communications. Strike Team Alpha, move to support the main assault. Team Beta, fall back and regroup behind the asteroid field. All crystal beings focus your shields on protecting the wounded. Her natural talent for seeing the big picture while keeping track of countless small details made her an exceptional battlefield commander. But it was her genuine care for every member of their alliance that made others willing to follow her into impossible situations. When the battle was over and the Dominion fleet was retreating in confusion, Lucy felt no satisfaction in their victory. Too many good people had died, and she knew this was just the beginning of a much larger war. "They'll send more ships," she told the gathered rebel leaders as they met in the ruins of the asteroid base, "and next time they'll be ready for our tactics." But Grimjaw could see something in the young human's eyes that filled him with pride. She wasn't thinking about giving up or hiding again. She was already planning their next move. "Then we'll have to get better faster than they do," Lucy said with quiet determination. "And we'll have to find more allies who are ready to fight for their freedom." Over the following months, their rebellion grew from a few hundred survivors to a movement that spanned half the galaxy. As species after species emerged from hiding to join the fight against Dominion oppression, Lucy traveled from world to world on Grimjaw's back, speaking with leaders and survivors and anyone who would listen, her message simple but powerful. No one had to face the Dominion alone anymore, but even as their alliance grew stronger, the Dominion was preparing a response that would test everything they had built together, marshaling forces that had not been seen since the great wars of conquest that had established their empire thousands of years ago in the council chambers of the Dominion capital. Ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy since before humans discovered fire were making plans to end the rebellion once and for all. "This alliance cannot be allowed to continue," declared the Prime Archon, his voice echoing with the authority of millennia. "If other species begin to believe they can resist us, our entire order will collapse." The order went out to every fleet and every garrison: find the rebels and destroy them completely, leaving no survivors to inspire others with false hope. But the Dominion had made one crucial mistake in their calculations. They still thought they were fighting against separate groups of escaped slaves and extinct species, not realizing that Lucy and Grimjaw had forged something entirely new in the galaxy. They had created a true alliance where different species genuinely cared about each other's survival, and that kind of unity was something the Dominion had never learned to understand or defeat. Silence filled the command center deep beneath the surface of Crimson Ridge as Lucy stared at the holographic display, showing the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 10,000 ships carrying weapons powerful enough to sterilize entire star systems. The Dominion Council had decided to end the rebellion personally, bringing forth planet-killer vessels that had been held in reserve since the Empire's founding, their dark hulls bristling with enough firepower to crack worlds in half. "They're heading straight for Earth," reported Anna, one of their best intelligence officers, her voice tight with fear as she read the intercepts from Dominion communications. Lucy felt her heart sink as she realized what the enemy was planning. They were going to destroy the ruins of humanity's homeworld as a message to every species in the galaxy about what happened to those who dared resist. The symbolic importance of Earth went far beyond its strategic value. It was the birthplace of the species that had brought together the greatest alliance in galactic history, and its destruction would be a blow to rebel morale that might never be recovered. "How long do we have?" Lucy asked, though she already knew the answer would not be enough. 72 hours until they reach Earth's system," Anna replied, "and our entire combined fleet is barely 1/10 their size." Around the command center, representatives from dozens of different species fell silent as they contemplated the impossible odds they were facing. Even with all their unity and tactical advantages, they could not hope to match such overwhelming force. But Lucy was not ready to give up. Not when so many people were counting on her to find a way forward. Send word to every rebel cell, every hidden colony, every ally we have across the galaxy, she ordered, her young voice carrying an authority that had grown from months of leading desperate battles. Tell them this is our last chance to strike back. Grimjaw watched his young partner with admiration as she began coordinating the largest military operation in rebel history, calling in favors and resources from across their network of allies. You cannot seriously be planning to attack that fleet directly, said Commander Reeves, a former Dominion officer who had defected to their cause. It would be suicide for everyone involved. Lucy turned to face the older man with eyes that held depths of wisdom and pain that should not have existed in someone barely 13 years old. Maybe it would be suicide to attack them the way they expect, she said quietly. But what if we don't fight the battle they're prepared for? Over the next 2 days, as the Dominion fleet moved inexorably toward Earth, Lucy worked with their best strategists and scientists to develop a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. The key insight came from her unique experiences, traveling between different species and learning how they communicated. Lucy had discovered that humans possessed an unusual ability to form genuine psychic bonds with other races, something the Dominion had never understood or studied. We're not just good at making friends, she explained to the assembled War Council. There's something in human brain structure that lets us connect with other species in ways that create actual telepathic links. The plan that emerged from this discovery was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of fighting the Dominion fleet with conventional weapons, they would use human-bonded networks to coordinate every free being in the galaxy in a single massive action. You're talking about turning every rebel sympathizer into a weapon, observed Dr. Chen, their chief scientist, but the energy requirements alone would be enormous. Lucy nodded, knowing that what she was proposing would require sacrifices from everyone involved. The crystal beings can provide power, the energy, creatures can carry the signals across space instantly, and the star dragons can focus and amplify the psychic resonance, she said. But it will only work if humans are willing to open their minds completely to alien consciousness. The risks were staggering. Humans who attempted such deep psychic fusion with alien minds might lose their sanity or even their individual identity, and there was no guarantee that the plan would work at all. But as word spread through their network of what Lucy was proposing, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Humans across the galaxy volunteered to attempt the fusion, even knowing they might not survive the experience. On the day the Dominion fleet arrived at Earth, they found themselves facing not an opposing army, but something they had never encountered before. A coordinated response from every free being in the galaxy, acting as a single unified organism. Lucy stood in the center of a vast crystal matrix that her allies had constructed in Grimjaw's cavern, her hands touching the smooth surfaces that would channel psychic energy from thousands of different species across dozens of star systems. "Are you ready, little warrior?" Grimjaw asked as he took his position at the heart of the array, his massive form glowing with power as he prepared to serve as the focus point for energies that could reshape reality itself. Lucy nodded, even though she knew that what they were about to attempt might destroy her mind or transform her into something no longer human. "For Earth," she whispered, "and for everyone who never got the chance to fight back." The fusion began slowly as human rebels across the galaxy opened their minds to their alien partners, creating connections that transcended species barriers and individual consciousness. Lucy felt her awareness expanding beyond her small body to encompass crystal beings on distant worlds and energy creatures dancing between the stars and star dragons. Hiding in nebulae she had never seen through thousands of human-bonded links, she could sense every ship in the Dominion fleet and every weapon they carried and every thought in their commanders' minds. More importantly, she could feel the fear and doubt that existed even among the Dominion forces. Many of their soldiers were conscripts from conquered worlds who had no love for their masters. Using the galaxy-spanning network of psychic connections, Lucy began broadcasting a message that reached every mind in the Dominion fleet simultaneously. Not words or images, but pure emotion. The love that humans felt for each other and for their alien allies. The determination to protect the innocent. The hope that a better future was possible. The effect was immediate and devastating to Dominion morale, as soldiers and officers across their fleet suddenly experienced what it felt like to be part of a community that genuinely cared about each member's welfare. Mutinies broke out on dozens of ships as conscripted troops turned against their officers, and entire squadrons began defecting to the rebel cause as they realized they could choose a different path. But the Dominion leadership was not so easily swayed, and their planet-killer weapons were still charging up to destroy Earth as a demonstration of their power. That was when Lucy made her final gambit, using the psychic network to coordinate every rebel ship and weapon and ally across the galaxy. In a single perfectly timed strike, star dragons emerged from hiding places throughout the galaxy to attack Dominion supply lines, while crystal beings disrupted their communications and energy creatures sabotaged their most powerful weapons. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history, not a conflict between opposing fleets but a galaxy-wide uprising, where every oppressed being struck back simultaneously. Lucy guided the assault from her position in the crystal matrix. Her consciousness spread across light years as she coordinated attacks and defenses with the precision of a master conductor, leading a cosmic orchestra. When the dust settled and the Dominion fleet was scattered or destroyed or defected, the galaxy had been fundamentally changed. The rigid hierarchy that had kept billions of beings in slavery for millennia had been shattered by the simple human concept that different people could work together as equals. Years later, Lucy stood in the gardens of New Earth, watching her own daughter play fearlessly among the crystal flowers, while Grimjaw told stories to a mixed group of human and alien children. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts and misunderstandings, and those who yearned for the old ways, but it was free in a way it had never been before. Do you ever regret it? Asked David, now an adult and serving as ambassador to the Crystal Confederation. Giving up your normal childhood to save the galaxy? Lucy smiled as she watched her daughter climb onto Grimjaw's massive claw without any fear, the way children do when they grow up in a world where dragons are friends and aliens are family. I think maybe I got something better than normal, she replied. I got to help create a galaxy where no child has to grow up afraid.